The diary arrived on the 5th day of my public humiliation. While social media burned with excerpts of my most private thoughts, and my world had collapsed into notifications I couldn't bear to check. My phone lit up with my literary agent's name, a name I hadn't expected to see after my sister Harper's betrayal. Mia. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My agent Caroline's voice was electric with excitement. I need you in New York tomorrow by noon for a bidding war. HarperCollins, Penguin Random House, Simon & Schuster. They're all fighting for your memoir rights. The coffee shop around me suddenly seemed too loud, too bright. 5 days I'd been hiding in my apartment, watching social media explode with intimate details from my childhood diary, and she was calling about a book deal. Caroline, my personal life is in shambles. I can't think about writing a memoir. My voice sounded distant, hollow. Her tone softened like velvet. The publishers are offering 6 figures, Mia. This is your chance to tell your own story, in your own words. If you don't claim your narrative now, Harper's version becomes the only one people know. A strange fire spread through my chest as 29 years of sisterly trust shattered in that single moment of clarity. The weight of Harper's betrayal, a wound I'd been nursing since discovering my teenage diary had been sold to a tabloid magazine, suddenly felt like an opportunity rather than just devastation. Harper didn't just share my secrets, Caroline. My words hung in the sterile silence of the nearly empty cafe. She edited them to make herself look better and me worse. She fabricated entire entries. Family loyalty is a two-way street, Mia, Caroline replied, determination coding each syllable. If you don't fight back with truth, her lies become your legacy. My name is Mia, I'm 29 and a freelance journalist. This is the story of how I reclaimed my voice after the ultimate betrayal. For years before the diary scandal, I'd noticed the growing envy, my sister's resentment of my writing career, my modest success with feature articles in national magazines that contrasted with her struggling graphic design business. My younger sister had always been the artistic one, her visual creativity and design sense a constant in our childhood, while my love of words remained my sanctuary. I'd been trying to help anyway, connecting her with editors I knew, recommending her portfolio for projects, sharing my small Brooklyn apartment with her when she moved to the city 6 months ago, while ignoring how her presence gradually invaded my personal space. I'd given Harper access to my home office on late nights when I was on assignment, grateful for her company in the lonely city, while never suspecting she was systematically searching through my belongings. Your sister says you've been writing about the family for years, my mother had accused during a devastating phone call. She found your diary entries. Is that why you became a journalist? To exploit us? I'd struggled to understand, bewildered by the accusation, until screenshots began appearing online. Pages from my teenage diary, ages 13 through 17, the burgundy leather-bound journal my grandmother had given me before she died. The journal I'd kept locked in my fireproof box alongside my passport and birth certificate. The journal that had disappeared 3 weeks earlier, when I'd convinced myself I'd misplaced it during a cleaning frenzy. I balanced the shock with denial at first. The embarrassment of seeing my adolescent thoughts about first kisses, family fights, and desperate insecurities splashed across the internet was paralyzing. But the betrayal crystallized when I saw my sister's exclusive interview, Living with a Writer, the truth behind my sister's words. Harper had sold my diary, then positioned herself as the victim of my secret writing. The first 48 hours passed in a blur of damage control and terrifying professional implications. My editor at The Atlantic, where I'd just landed a coveted contract position, called immediately. "This isn't great timing, Mia," he said carefully. "But I know family is complicated. Take some time, then we'll talk." My father, Richard, texted his support instantly. "This isn't who we raised Harper to be," he wrote, voice thick with disappointment. "Mom and I are horrified. We're calling her now." I nodded, too numb to reply, too devastated to process that my career might be ending, because my teenage crush on my high school English teacher was now public knowledge, alongside my unfiltered opinions about colleagues I still worked with. I curled into the corner of my couch, refusing to check social media as notifications overwhelmed my phone. I talked to no one except my best friend Zoe, who brought groceries and sat silently beside me, afraid words might make everything worse. By the fifth morning, Caroline's call about publishers bidding for my story felt like a cruel joke. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Standing in that quiet cafe, the proposition hanging between us, something inside me finally awakened. 29 years of being the responsible sister, the one who never caused problems, who kept secrets and smoothed tensions. I'd spent my entire life documenting rather than participating, observing rather than acting. "I'll write it," I said, my voice suddenly calm and unshakable. "But I'm telling everything." I hung up, ordered another espresso, and opened my laptop, a strange determination settling over me despite the chaos. "Everything okay?" asked Marcus, the barista who'd become my morning constant. "Not really," I admitted, "but I think I'm exactly where I need to be." The cafe hummed with quiet conversations as doubt crept in. My family relationships might never recover from what I was about to do. Would my decision destroy any chance of reconciliation? The weight of truth suddenly felt heavier than silence ever had. My phone buzzed again. Harper, this time. "Mom says you're getting a book deal. I'm sorry about the diary, but you were writing about us without permission. Send me the publisher contact. I could design the cover at least." I stared at the screen, stunned. She had exposed my most intimate thoughts to the world, and now wanted to profit further from my pain. More messages followed from relatives, all focused on potential opportunities from my humiliation, none acknowledging the profound violation. Their priorities revealed a painful truth I'd been avoiding. Their version of family was about advantage, not love. As evening fell, I was outlining chapters in my notebook when Carolyn called again. "Penguin's offering $275,000, she gasped, "with a major marketing commitment. They want chapters in 3 weeks. Can you do it?" My fingers tightened around my pen, the possibilities overwhelming. "I can do it," I whispered, feeling something shift inside me. "I have to." The advance would change my life. Enough to buy my own apartment, to stop taking assignments that didn't matter to me, to establish real security. Harper's betrayal might have exposed my past, but this opportunity could secure my future. I was calculating financial possibilities when Harper herself walked into the cafe, her expression a practiced mask of contrition. "You weren't answering texts," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "We need to talk about this book thing." I closed my notebook slowly, my heart pounding but resolve unwavering. "There's nothing to discuss," I replied calmly. "You sold my private diary without consent. Now I'm writing my story, with consent." Harper's facade cracked slightly. "It wasn't personal, Mia. We were broke last month. I needed the money. Besides, your diary made me sound terrible. I had to defend myself." I stared incredulous. By selling my privacy? By lying about me? My voice stayed steady, fueled by a new strength. "You could have asked for help. Instead, you betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible." She leaned forward, voice dropping. "It was just teenage stuff, Mia." Nobody cares about ancient history. The cafe suddenly felt too small for this conversation. "I care," I said simply. "Those were my words, my experiences, my truth." "You had no right." Harper's expression hardened. "So now you'll publicly shame me with this book? Real sisterly." I met her gaze without flinching. "I'm going to tell my story honestly, including what happened before the diary and what happened after. The whole truth, not edited excerpts." She bristled, her voice rising slightly. "Mom and Dad will hate this. You'll destroy our family for money and attention." The accusation hung between us, sharp and revealing. "No, Harper. You did that when you decided my privacy was worth less than a paycheck." That confrontation marked the beginning of my metamorphosis. I walked home alone through Brooklyn streets, mentally composing opening lines for chapters, my journalist's mind already structuring the narrative arc of betrayal and redemption. At home, I created a writing schedule, cleared my freelance calendar except for essential assignments, and began the painful process of reconstructing what had been in my stolen diary. The following morning, my mother called, her voice tight with anxiety. "This book is a mistake, Mia. Family matters should stay private." The irony was suffocating. "Harper already made them public, Mom. I'm just making sure the truth is what's shared, not her edited version." "She's your sister," my mother insisted. "Sisters fight, they make mistakes. This book will follow her forever." I closed my eyes against sudden tears. And what about what follows me? The diary is already following me forever. My father called next, his approach gentler but message similar. "We're worried about you, sweetheart. Writing in anger rarely leads to your best work." I appreciated his concern but recognized the subtle manipulation. "I'm not writing in anger, Dad. I'm writing in truth. There's a difference." 3 days later, I signed the contract with Penguin. The advance, paid in installments, would transform my financial reality. I created a detailed outline, working title, "The Words Between Us," a memoir of betrayal and reclamation. The project consumed me, days blending as I reconstructed my past with journalistic precision. I interviewed childhood friends about shared memories, consulted old emails and text messages, reviewed photographs and school records. My training as a fact-checker became my salvation. Every claim would be substantiated, every memory verified where possible. This would not be revenge. It would be restoration. Harper attempted reconciliation through intermediaries, mutual friends, our cousin Elise, even my favorite professor from graduate school. Each approach carried the same subtext: stop the book. None acknowledged the fundamental violation or offered genuine apology. 2 weeks into writing, I received a formal letter from an attorney representing Harper. It demanded I cease work on the memoir, claiming invasion of privacy and defamation. The irony was breathtaking. I forwarded it to Caroline, who connected me with Penguin's legal team. Their response was swift and reassuring. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation claims. The attorney's letter had an unexpected effect. It crystallized my purpose. This wasn't just about my diary anymore. It was about power dynamics that had shaped our relationship since childhood. Harper had always taken what was mine: attention, opportunities, and now my most private thoughts, while positioning herself as entitled to whatever she wanted. The memoir became a reclamation project, not just of my narrative but of my agency. As chapters took shape, I found myself excavating patterns I'd never fully acknowledged. Harper's smaller betrayals over years. My parents' subtle enabling of her behavior. My own complicity through silence and accommodation. 6 weeks in, I received another unexpected call, my editor at The Atlantic. "We've been following this situation," he said carefully. "And we'd like to offer you a feature assignment. Personal essay about privacy, betrayal, and social media. Your experience as the framework, but broader cultural implications. Interested?" The opportunity felt like professional validation when I needed it most. The essay would serve as a perfect platform to address the situation publicly before the memoir's release. I accepted immediately, my confidence growing with each professional vote of confidence in my perspective. As I wrote both the Atlantic piece and the memoir chapters, something remarkable began happening. My Instagram followers tripled. My previous articles saw surging traffic. Literary festivals sent speaking invitations. Harper's attempt to expose and humiliate me was having the opposite effect. It was establishing me as a voice on privacy and ethical boundaries in the digital age. 7 weeks after signing the book contract, my Atlantic essay, The Public-Private, When Your Diary Becomes Everyone's Business, was published. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Interview requests flooded in. The article trended on social media platforms. Readers shared their own stories of betrayal and exposure. I was preparing for a podcast interview when Harper appeared at my apartment door unannounced. She looked smaller somehow, her usual confidence dimmed. "Can we talk? Please?" Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sat stiffly on the edge of the couch we'd chosen together at IKEA months earlier. "I read your Atlantic piece," she said finally. "It was good. Really good." I waited, sensing more. "You didn't name me," she continued. "You could have, but you didn't." I shrugged slightly. "The piece wasn't about you specifically. It was about the larger issue." Her eyes filled unexpectedly. "But the book will name me." It wasn't a question. "Yes," I confirmed. "The memoir tells my complete story. You're a significant part of that story." She nodded slowly, tears spilling over. "I really messed up, Mia. I was jealous and desperate and stupid." For the first time since the betrayal, I saw a glimpse of genuine remorse. Not performative regret, but authentic recognition of harm caused. "Why the diary?" I asked. The question that had haunted me for weeks. "Why not just ask me for money if you needed it?" Harper wiped her eyes. "Because you would have given it to me," she whispered. "And I was tired of being the failure while you succeeded at everything." "The diary? It showed you weren't perfect either, that you struggled too. I thought it would make me feel better somehow." The raw honesty stunned me. "Did it?" I asked softly. "Did exposing my private thoughts make you feel better?" She shook her head miserably. "It made everything worse. I lost my sister. Mom and Dad can barely look at me. And now everyone will know what I did." I should have felt vindicated by her suffering, but something unexpected happened instead. Seeing her genuine pain cracked open a door I'd thought permanently sealed. Not forgiveness, not yet, but possibility. "The book isn't finished," I said finally. "There's still time to shape how your part of the story ends." She looked up, confusion mixing with hope. "What do you mean?" I chose my words carefully. "I mean your actions going forward matter. How you handle the consequences, whether you take responsibility publicly or continue trying to silence me." That conversation marked a turning point, though not an easy resolution. Harper moved out the following week, finding a room in a shared apartment in Queens. She declined further legal action, instead posting a public apology on her social platforms, acknowledging what she'd done without excuses. My parents remained conflicted, torn between children, worried about family reputation. My father visited, bringing dinner and tentative support. "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself," he said carefully. "I just wish circumstances were different." My mother kept her distance, sending brief texts that revealed her discomfort with public airing of family matters. The memoir took shape, evolving from rage to reflection. I found myself writing not just about Harper's betrayal, but about the complex family dynamics that had created both of us. About the subtle ways girls are taught to compete, rather than support each other. About the power of words to both wound and heal. 3 months into writing my memoir, I found myself in a sunlit corner office at Penguin Random House, surrounded by marketing executives discussing cover designs and publicity strategies. My completed manuscript sat on the polished conference table, my name embossed on the title page. The words between us, a memoir of betrayal and reclamation, by Mia Calloway. The surreal moment was interrupted when my phone vibrated with a text from Harper. "Just saw your book listed for pre-order. I'm happy for you. I mean it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." The path from betrayed sister to published author had been extraordinary and painful in equal measure. Each chapter I wrote had excavated memories both beautiful and difficult. Harper and I building blanket forts during thunderstorms, competing for our parents, attention at recitals, the gradual fracturing of sisterly trust through small betrayals that culminated in the ultimate violation. As my editor Catherine praised the emotional honesty of the final draft, I felt an unexpected pang of sadness beneath my pride. The book would launch my career to new heights, but at what personal cost? "We're projecting first-week sales of 50,000 copies," the marketing director was saying, her voice breaking through my thoughts. "Your Atlantic piece created the perfect platform, and the social media response has been extraordinary. People are connecting deeply with your story of reclaiming your narrative. The numbers were staggering. A writer's dream come true through circumstances I'd never have chosen. The morning shows are fighting over who gets you first, Caroline added, her eyes gleaming with professional satisfaction. Today's show, Good Morning America, CBS Mornings. They all want the exclusive. I nodded, attempting to match their enthusiasm while a knot formed in my stomach. Every interview would mean publicly dissecting my family's dysfunction, exposing not just Harper's betrayal, but the complex dynamic that had made it possible. As the meeting concluded, I wandered through Manhattan streets, my achievement shadowed by its origin story. The memoir had transformed from an act of defensive truth-telling to something more nuanced, an exploration of sisterhood, privacy in the digital age, and the thin line between documentation and exploitation. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd turned my sister's betrayal into literary success, the very thing she'd resented about my career. My phone buzzed with another text, this time from my father. Just reserved tickets for your NYC book launch. Mom's coming too. We're proud of you, sweetheart. The simple message brought unexpected tears. My parents had gradually shifted from concerned neutrality to cautious support as they'd read early chapters. You've been fair, my father had said after reading the manuscript. Painful, but fair. Harper and I had established a fragile truce over the intervening months. Not friendship, certainly not the closeness we'd once shared, but a careful, distant respect. She'd moved to Philadelphia for a fresh start, accepting a position with a design agency that appreciated her artistic talents without knowing her personal history. Our communications were sporadic but civil, each of us feeling our way through this new terrain. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Back in my Brooklyn apartment, I sat at my writing desk overlooking the street where Harper and I had once walked together, laughing about shared jokes and planning our conquests of New York City. The space felt emptier without her chaotic energy, though more peaceful too. I opened my laptop to find an email from a name I didn't recognize. Jessica Williams, with a subject line that made my heart stutter. I found your diary. Dear Miss Calloway, the message began. I purchased a burgundy leather journal at a secondhand shop in Queens 3 weeks ago. After reading several entries, I realized it was your stolen diary that's been in the news. I haven't shared it with anyone. Please let me know how I can return it to you. A phone number followed the simple message. My hands trembling, I called the number immediately. Jessica answered on the second ring, her voice warm and straightforward as she explained finding the diary while browsing for vintage notebooks. The shop owner said someone had sold it to him recently. When I started reading it at home and realized what it was, I searched your name online. I couldn't believe what I was holding. We arranged to meet the following day at a cafe near her workplace. I barely slept that night, thoughts racing between disbelief and anticipation. The diary that had caused such devastation was about to return to me, the authentic chronicle of my adolescence, rather than the cherry-picked excerpts Harper had sold to the tabloids. Jessica was waiting when I arrived, a slender woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She slid a familiar burgundy book across the table without ceremony. I only read enough to identify it, she assured me. Once I understood what it was, I stopped. Some things should remain private. The weight of the diary in my hands felt simultaneously heavier and lighter than I remembered. Thank you, I whispered, running my fingers over the worn cover. I never thought I'd see this again. Jessica shook her head, dismissing my gratitude. I just did what anyone should do. But can I ask, how are you doing with everything? Your story resonated with me. My sister and I, we've had our struggles too. Something in her tone invited confidence. We ended up talking for hours, Jessica sharing her own story of familial estrangement and eventual reconciliation. It took years, she admitted, and it's still imperfect, but eventually we found a way to be sisters again, without expecting perfection from each other. As I walked home clutching my recovered diary, Jessica's words echoed in my mind alongside a growing realization. The memoir I'd written wasn't just my reclamation of narrative control, it was potentially the first step toward an eventual reconciliation, not through ignoring Harper's betrayal, but by fully processing it and choosing what came next. That evening, I opened the diary for the first time in nearly a year. The handwriting of my teenage self felt both familiar and foreign, dramatic declarations about crushes, alongside surprisingly insightful observations about family dynamics. I found myself smiling at passages where my adolescent self had analyzed Harper with unexpected compassion. H. Failing math again but won't accept help. Pride or fear. Pretends not to care, but I heard her crying last night. The diary contained far more nuance than the excerpts Harper had selected for publication. Yes, there were entries about resenting her for monopolizing our parents' attention, but there were just as many expressing admiration for her artistic talent and free spirit. The full picture was complicated and loving, not the one-dimensional rivalry portrayed in the tabloid exposé. On impulse, I texted Harper. Someone found my diary and returned it to me, reading it again after all this time. It's different than I remembered. Her response came quickly. Different how? I considered carefully before answering truthfully. More compassionate toward you than the parts you chose to share. I was a better sister in writing than I sometimes remember being. Her reply took longer this time. I only shared the parts that hurt me. That was wrong. There were good parts too. I miss those sometimes. The simple admission created an opening I hadn't anticipated. Would you want to read the memoir before it's published? Not for approval, but so you're prepared. So there are no surprises. The ellipsis appeared and disappeared several times before her answer materialized. Yes, I think I would. Thank you. I forwarded the final manuscript that night, unsure what response to expect, but certain it was the right thing to do. The vulnerability of having her read my uncensored thoughts about our relationship terrified me, but also felt necessary for whatever came next. 2 days passed without word, my anxiety growing with each hour of silence. On the third morning, my phone rang with Harper's number. I answered cautiously, unsure whether to expect anger or something else entirely. I finished it, she said without preamble, her voice thick with emotion. It's beautiful, Mia. Painful but beautiful. Relief flooded through me. You're not angry? I asked cautiously. She sighed, the sound carrying years of complicated feelings. How can I be angry about your truth when I exploited it first? You had every right to tell your story, and you were kinder than you needed to be. I tried to be honest, not cruel, I said softly, about all of us, including myself. Harper's voice cracked slightly. That's what hurt the most, actually, seeing how well you understand why I did it. The jealousy, the financial pressure, feeling like I was always in your shadow. You saw me more clearly than I saw myself. We talked for nearly 2 hours, the longest conversation we'd had since the betrayal. Not fixing everything. That would take far more time, but laying groundwork for a different kind of relationship. One based on adult understanding rather than childhood patterns and competition. As my publication date approached, the publicity machine accelerated. I found myself navigating morning show interviews with growing confidence, speaking honestly about family dynamics, betrayal, and the complicated process of forgiveness. Your memoir isn't just about your sister's betrayal, noted a particularly insightful interviewer. It's about the power of owning your story, even the painful parts. I nodded, suddenly understanding something fundamental about my journey. When my diary was stolen and exploited, I felt utterly powerless, I explained. Writing the memoir gave me back control, not just of my narrative, but of my response to betrayal. I could choose bitterness or growth. I'm trying to choose growth. The night before my book launch, I received an unexpected email from my high school English teacher, the one I'd had an adolescent crush on, whose name had been among the most embarrassing diary revelations. Just ordered your memoir, she wrote. Wanted you to know I'm proud of you for turning painful experience into meaningful art. That's what the best writers do. Her words crystallized something I'd been feeling throughout the publication process. The diary's exposure, painful as it had been, had forced me to confront and integrate parts of myself I'd kept separate. The private self who recorded unfiltered thoughts, and the public self who maintained careful boundaries. The memoir represented a deliberate choice about which parts of my story to share and how to share them. The book launch exceeded everyone's expectations. The event space was filled beyond capacity, with standing room only as I read selected passages and answered questions from readers who'd connected with different aspects of my story. I scanned the crowd as I spoke, finding my parents seated in the front row, their expressions a complex mixture of pride and lingering discomfort with such public disclosure. In the back corner, partially obscured by a column but unmistakably present, stood Harper. She hadn't told me she was coming, and I hadn't expected her. Our eyes met briefly across the crowded room, and she offered a small, tentative smile before looking away. Her presence felt like a peace offering of sorts, an acknowledgement of my achievement despite its origins in her betrayal. During the signing portion of the event, I inscribed dozens of books with personalized messages, my hand cramping as I thanked readers for their support. The line finally dwindled until just one person remained. Harper, clutching a copy of the memoir, her expression uncertain as she approached the table. "I wasn't sure if I should come," she admitted quietly. "But it felt wrong not to be here." I nodded, understanding the courage it had taken. "I'm glad you came," I said simply. She placed her copy on the table. "Would you sign it for me?" The request hung between us, weighted with significance. I opened to the title page, considering what message could possibly encompass everything between us. Finally, I wrote simply, "To Harper, may we both find the words to rebuild. With love, Mia." She read the inscription, her eyes filling with tears. "I'd like that," she whispered. "The rebuilding part." As we walked out together into the cool evening air, an awkward silence settled between us. Not hostile, but uncertain, neither of us quite knowing how to navigate this new territory. "There's a diner around the corner," I suggested finally. "If you wanted to grab coffee or something." Harper nodded, falling into step beside me. "I'd like that," she said cautiously. "I have an early train back to Philly tomorrow, but coffee would be good." The conversation that followed wasn't dramatic or particularly profound, just two sisters sharing a meal, carefully avoiding landmines while finding small patches of common ground. We talked about her new job, my upcoming book tour, our parents, tentative steps toward retirement. Normal sister topics layered over the extraordinary circumstances that had brought us to this moment. When we parted outside the diner, our hug was brief but genuine. "Congratulations on the book," Harper said, stepping back. "You deserve this success." "Thank you," I replied, meaning it completely. "For coming tonight." "For trying." She nodded, hailing a passing taxi. "Call me when you're in Philadelphia for your tour?" The question carried more hope than either of us had expressed in months. "I will," I promised. "We'll have dinner." As her taxi pulled away, I stood on the sidewalk feeling the strange, circular nature of our journey. My most private thoughts had been exposed against my will, leading me to deliberately share an even deeper version of my story with the world. The violation had become a doorway to authentic expression and unexpected professional success. The memoir's first week exceeded all sales projections, debuting at number 3 on the New York Times bestseller list. Translation rights sold in 12 countries. Film rights became the subject of a bidding war. My calendar filled with speaking engagements at universities and literary festivals. Success beyond anything I'd imagined possible a year earlier. Yet the achievement that meant most came in smaller, more personal forms. A handwritten letter from my mother, acknowledging both her pride in my work and her regret for not better supporting me after the initial betrayal. A text message thread with Harper that gradually evolved from cautious pleasantries to genuine exchanges. The knowledge that I'd transformed victimhood into agency through the deliberate act of storytelling. 6 months after publication, I was invited to speak at a writers' conference about memoir as a vehicle for personal reclamation. Standing at the podium facing a room of aspiring writers, I found myself reflecting on the strange path that had led me there. Sometimes, I told them, our most powerful stories emerge from our most painful experiences. Not because suffering automatically creates meaning, but because how we respond to betrayal reveals who we truly are. A young woman raised her hand during the Q&A. "Has your sister read the memoir?" she asked hesitantly. "How did she respond?" I smiled, appreciating the perfect closing note for my presentation. Yes, she's read it, I answered honestly. And her response has been the beginning of a new chapter for both of us. One we're writing together, word by careful word. That evening in my hotel room, I opened my laptop to find an email from Harper with an attachment. Thought you might like to see this, she'd written. Just finished the final design today. The attachment was a digital artwork. A stylized illustration of two young girls building a blanket fort surrounded by floating diary pages that formed protective walls around them rather than exposing them. At the bottom, a simple caption. For my sister Mia, some stories are ours to tell together. I printed the image and pinned it above my writing desk back home, a daily reminder that betrayal need not be the end of a relationship, that sometimes it can be the painful beginning of a more authentic connection. Not through denying the harm done, but by acknowledging it fully and choosing to create something new from the broken pieces. 1 year after the publication of my memoir, I stood on a sunlit stage at Columbia University's School of Journalism, addressing a packed auditorium of aspiring writers and journalists. My book, The Words Between Us, had just been awarded the Pulitzer Prize for Autobiography, an honor so unexpected that I'd nearly missed the announcement while on assignment in Argentina. As I scanned the sea of faces looking up at me with admiration and curiosity, I marveled at how completely my life had transformed from that devastating moment when I discovered my sister had sold my diary to the highest bidder. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The boundary between personal and public has never been more permeable, I told the attentive audience. In an age when privacy feels increasingly like a luxury rather than a right, we must all consider what parts of our stories we choose to share and which parts we protect. The words felt both profound and deeply personal, born from an experience that had forced me to redefine my understanding of boundaries, betrayal, and the power of narrative. After my lecture, a young woman approached me, clutching my book so tightly her knuckles whitened. "Your story saved me," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "My brother posted my private messages online after a fight. I thought my life was over, but reading how you reclaimed your narrative gave me courage to write my own story." Her words struck me profoundly, the realization that my pain had become a beacon for others navigating similar betrayals. This was happening with increasing frequency, strangers sharing their stories of exposed secrets, family betrayals, and the complicated journey toward healing. Each conversation reinforced what had become the unexpected gift of Harper's violation: the creation of a community bound together by the universal experience of having our private lives made public without consent. The email had arrived 3 months earlier, just as the book was being nominated for major literary awards. "Dear Ms. Calloway," it began formally. "I represent Orchid Films, and we're interested in adapting your memoir for a limited streaming series. Would you be open to discussing rights and potentially serving as a consultant?" The signature belonged to Aisha Patel, an award-winning producer known for nuanced adaptations of literary works. My initial reaction had been skepticism. How could anyone translate the interior experience of betrayal and reclamation to the screen without sensationalizing it? The diary exposure had already been tabloid fodder. A film adaptation risked turning personal pain into entertainment. Yet I agreed to meet with Aisha, drawn by her reputation for integrity and my own curiosity about extending the conversation my book had started. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Our meeting in a quiet Manhattan restaurant surprised me. Rather than focusing on dramatic moments from the memoir, Aisha spoke passionately about themes of sisterhood, privacy in the digital age, and the complexity of family loyalty. "What fascinates me isn't the sensational aspects," she explained, her eyes bright with creative vision. "It's the rebuilding, how two sisters find their way back to each other after fundamental trust is broken." Her approach resonated deeply, addressing my primary concern about adaptation. "The last thing I want is to re-traumatize your family," she continued. "I'd like Harper to feel comfortable with how she's portrayed. Complex, flawed, but ultimately human, just as you wrote her." The consideration took me by surprise. No one in the publishing process had expressed concern for Harper's feelings. She had been cast simply as the villain, in a compelling narrative. I'd need to discuss it with her, I said cautiously. We've made progress, but it's still complicated between us. Aisha nodded, understanding. Of course, take all the time you need. But I believe this could be healing, showing the full arc of betrayal to reconciliation. So many families never find their way back from that brink. The conversation with Harper proved less difficult than anticipated. We'd established a cautious friendship over the months since publication, meeting for occasional lunches when I visited Philadelphia or she came to New York. Our interactions remained somewhat guarded, the shadow of betrayal never entirely absent, but genuine affection had begun to resurface between careful navigations of sensitive topics. They want to make it into a series, I explained over video call, watching her expression carefully. I wanted to know how you'd feel about that before I consider it. Harper was silent for a long moment, her graphic designer's eye evident, as she absently adjusted the collar of her shirt. Would I be portrayed as the villain? She finally asked, the question revelatory in its vulnerability. No, I answered honestly. The producer specifically mentioned showing your humanity, your complexity. The full journey, including our steps toward reconciliation. Harper nodded slowly. I'd want some input, she said carefully. Not control, just consultation rights. To make sure it's fair. The request seemed reasonable. More than reasonable given the circumstances. I'll make that a condition of the agreement. I promised. And I'd like you to meet Aisha before I sign anything. Harper's smile held genuine warmth for the first time in our conversation. I appreciate that, Mia. More than you know. The day Harper and I met with Aisha together marked a turning point in our healing journey. Seated side by side across from the producer, we presented a united front, despite our complicated history. As Aisha outlined her vision for the adaptation, I found myself watching Harper's reactions more than listening to the pitch itself. What matters most, Aisha emphasized, is authenticity. Not just in portraying the betrayal, but in showing the messy, non-linear process of rebuilding trust. Few stories show that part, the hard work of reconciliation after a profound breach. Harper leaned forward slightly, engaged by this approach. That's important to me, she admitted. That it's not just about what I did wrong, but about how we're both trying to make it right. As the meeting concluded, Aisha made an unexpected suggestion. Harper, would you consider serving as a visual consultant? Your background in graphic design could be valuable for the production design, helping create the visual language of the sisters' world. The invitation visibly moved Harper, acknowledging her creative value independent of her role in the story. Walking out together afterward, Harper turned to me on the sidewalk. She's good, she said simply. I think she'd do right by both of us. I nodded agreement, feeling a weight lifting that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. So you're okay with this? Really okay? Harper's expression turned reflective. I did something terrible, Mia. I can't change that. But maybe being part of telling the whole story, including how we're finding our way back, is part of making amends. The contract negotiations took months, with both Harper and I retaining significant creative consultation rights. The adaptation announcement created another surge of interest in the memoir, pushing sales past the 1 million copy mark worldwide. My agent Caroline called with news that film rights for my next book, still unwritten, were already generating interest. You could write about anything now, she marveled. You've established yourself as a major literary voice. Her words planted a seed that had been germinating since my conversations with readers affected by similar betrayals. What if my next project explored privacy, exposure, and healing from a broader perspective? Not just my story, but the stories of others who had experienced violations of their intimate lives in the digital age? I began researching, conducting interviews with people whose private communications had been exposed without consent. Revenge porn victims. Politicians caught in scandals. Ordinary people whose text messages had gone viral. Children of memoirists who resented having their childhoods documented publicly. Each conversation revealed new dimensions of what it means to lose control of your personal narrative and how to reclaim it. Harper became an unexpected ally in this new project, her perspective as someone who had violated another's privacy providing crucial insight. "I never thought about the ripple effects," she admitted during one of our working sessions. "How exposing your diary would affect not just you, but our parents, your colleagues, even the people you'd written about. The violation extended far beyond just you. Our collaboration deepened our healing in ways neither of us had anticipated. Working together professionally created a new framework for our relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than the competitive dynamic that had characterized our childhood." Harper's design sensibility complemented my journalistic approach, her visual conceptualizations bringing clarity to complex ethical questions I was exploring. My parents watched our reconciliation with a mixture of relief and lingering apprehension. "I never thought you two would speak again, let alone work together," my mother admitted during a family dinner. "But I worry about reopening old wounds with this TV adaptation." My father nodded agreement. "Are you sure this is healthy for either of you?" Harper surprised me by answering before I could. "Actually, it's been healing," she said quietly. "Working together on the adaptation means we're both equally involved in shaping how our story is told. It's balanced the power dynamic between us." I nodded appreciation for her insight. "And it's forcing us to talk about things we might otherwise avoid. Difficult conversations, but necessary ones." As pre-production for the series began, Harper and I found ourselves drawn into creative decisions neither of us had anticipated. Casting discussions proved particularly surreal. Reviewing audition tapes of actresses portraying versions of ourselves felt like watching parallel lives unfold. "She captures your mannerisms perfectly," Harper laughed during one viewing session. "That little thing you do with your eyebrows when you're skeptical." I smiled, enjoying her amusement. "What about this one for you?" I queued up another audition. "She has that artistic intensity you get when you're designing." We were creating a strange new memory, watching interpretations of our worst moments together, finding unexpected moments of lightness in the process. The adaptation required us to revisit painful chapters of our history, but from a new vantage point. No longer trapped in the emotional immediacy of betrayal, we could examine our relationship patterns with greater perspective. "I was jealous of you for as long as I can remember," Harper admitted during one late-night conversation after a production meeting. "Your confidence, your clarity about wanting to write. I never felt I measured up. The confessions startled me, but you were always the talented one." I countered. "The artistic prodigy everyone admired." She shook her head, smiling sadly. "That's not how I experienced it. I saw myself as the screw-up, the impulsive one who couldn't match your discipline. You always knew exactly what you wanted." These revelations continued, each uncovering layers of misperception that had shaped our relationship for decades. We'd been operating from entirely different narratives about our shared childhood, each feeling inadequate in comparison to an idealized version of the other that existed only in our own minds. 7 months into the adaptation process, the first day of filming arrived. Harper and I stood side by side on set, watching actors recreate the devastating moment when I discovered my diary had been sold to the tabloids. Seeing my pain performed by another was surreal but unexpectedly cathartic, as though the experience was being lifted slightly away from me, becoming part of a larger story rather than just my personal wound. Between takes, Harper reached for my hand, squeezing it briefly. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, not for the first time but with renewed emotion triggered by the vivid reenactment. "I know," I replied softly. "I believe you." The simple exchange contained years of complicated healing. Not perfect forgiveness, but something perhaps more valuable. Acceptance of both the harm done and the genuine remorse that followed. As filming progressed, a curious phenomenon emerged. The actresses playing us began seeking our input beyond the script requirements, wanting to understand the emotional truth of our experiences. "What were you actually feeling in this moment?" Eliza, the actress portraying me, asked during a lunch break. "The script says anger, but I sensed something more complex." Her question prompted me to articulate emotions I'd never fully processed. "It wasn't just anger," I acknowledged. "It was this profound disorientation, like the ground had disappeared beneath me. This person I'd trusted my entire life had violated something so fundamentally private. I couldn't reconcile the sister I knew with someone capable of that betrayal. These conversations became opportunities for Harper and me to understand each other's perspectives more deeply. Watching Naomi, the actress playing Harper, rehearse the scene where she justified selling the diary to the tabloid, Harper turned to me with tears in her eyes. "I sound so heartless," she whispered. "Was I really that callous?" The question deserved honesty. In that moment, yes, I admitted. But people aren't just their worst decisions. The script also shows your journey afterward, the regret, the efforts to make amends. That's equally true. My words seemed to release something in her, an acceptance of her actions without being permanently defined by them. As filming concluded and post-production began, my new book took shape alongside the adaptation process. Titled Exposed: Privacy, Betrayal, and Reclamation in the Digital Age, it expanded beyond my personal experience to examine the broader cultural implications of our increasingly public lives. Harper's contribution, a chapter on the psychology of betrayal from the betrayer's perspective, added a dimension of accountability that strengthened the work immeasurably. The book's release coincided with early screenings of the series adaptation. Critics praised both for their nuanced exploration of complex ethical territory. "Calloway has accomplished something remarkable," wrote one reviewer. "She's transformed a deeply personal violation into a cultural touchstone for understanding privacy and reconciliation in the digital era." Another noted, "The most powerful aspect of both the book and series is the authentic portrayal of rebuilding after betrayal. There are no easy answers or instantaneous forgiveness, just the messy, non-linear process of two sisters finding their way back to each other through sustained effort and radical honesty." 2 years after Harper sold my diary, we sat together in a darkened theater, watching the premiere of the Words Between Us limited series. The final scene showed fictionalized versions of ourselves, sitting on a park bench, neither fully comfortable nor completely estranged. Two women with a complicated history, navigating a new relationship, built on hard-won understanding. As the credits rolled and applause filled the theater, Harper turned to me, her expression reflective. "We made something meaningful from something terrible," she said quietly. "I never thought that would be possible," I nodded, feeling the truth of her words. "That's the thing about stories," I replied. "We don't just tell them, they tell us. About who we are, who we were, and who we might become." In the lobby afterward, surrounded by well-wishers and industry executives, a young journalist approached us for a quote. "What's next for the Calloway sisters?" she asked brightly, recording device extended. Harper and I exchanged glances, a lifetime of communication contained in that single look. "We're collaborating on a workshop series," I explained, "helping people navigate privacy violations and family estrangement." Harper nodded, adding, "And we're developing resources for people on both sides of betrayal, those who've been hurt and those who've caused hurt. The path back to relationship isn't the same for everyone, but we've learned some things that might help others." Later that night, back in my apartment, with Harper staying in the guest room, I found her sitting on the balcony, gazing at the Brooklyn skyline. I joined her silently, 2 cups of tea in hand. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't found my diary that day?" I asked, after a comfortable silence. "If it had just stayed in that secondhand shop?" Harper considered the question seriously. "I think about that a lot," she admitted. "Part of me wants to believe we would have found our way to a better relationship eventually. But another part knows that sometimes it takes something breaking completely before it can be rebuilt the right way." She turned to me, her expression sincere. "I would never choose to hurt you like that again, but I'm grateful for who we've become through healing it." I understood exactly what she meant. The betrayal had forced us to confront patterns neither of us had been brave enough to address. The competition, the misperceptions, the unhealed childhood wounds. The work of rebuilding had required a level of honesty we might never have achieved otherwise. "To answering the difficult questions," I said, raising my teacup in a small toast. She smiled, touching her cup to mine. "And to finding the words between us," she replied, referencing the title that had come to represent our journey from estrangement to reconnection. We sat together in comfortable silence, two sisters who had traversed the territory from deepest betrayal to genuine collaboration. Not perfect, not without occasional tensions and misunderstandings, but fundamentally changed by the shared commitment to creating something meaningful from profound hurt. Our story had become larger than ourselves, touching readers, viewers, and workshop participants navigating their own complicated paths toward healing. The memoir that began as an act of reclamation had transformed into something neither of us could have imagined that devastating day, when my most private thoughts were exposed to the world. It had become a bridge, not just between Harper and me, but between countless others separated by betrayal and struggling to find their way back to connection. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.